John McCain, who came back from the POW camps of Vietnam and said, do anything to me, including breaking all my long bones again, but do not put me in isolation. And it also works on our children, which is why an 11-year-old in California right before Christmas blew their brains out on a Zoom call, because let's face it, guys, a Zoom TV call is not the same as education.
Aren't we all, in a way, POWs under this system? I mean, I don't mean to diminish actual prisoners of previous wars, but it feels like we are all prisoners right now under a medical enslavement system. And aren't we seeing POW-like mental health symptoms and disorders emerging from this?
Absolutely. I mean, you can talk to a number of mental health professionals. I know one who spoke out in April of last year to the Orange County Board of Education at their meeting, and he said he was already at that point seeing children and adults who were agoraphobic, would not leave their house, would cry when you took their mask away from them, couldn't confront society without these aids. You're seeing Stockholm syndrome type symptoms. And I was a socialite. That is my background, by the way, in college. You're seeing a lot of that as well in the average population, who is bonded to the people who are enforcing these draconian techniques on them and never once questioning it. If your viewers have never heard of the Stanley Milgram experiment, they'd be well served to go Google that, but I'll give you the brief on it. Stanley Milgram was a researcher, a professor at Yale University in the early 1960s, and he wanted to see if what happened in Nazi Germany could happen again. Were those millions of German people evil, or was there something in our hard wiring that predisposed them to following orders and being blindly obedient and looking the other way, even when the result of that was fatalities to their neighbors? And he conceived of this experiment where he dragged in average people, you, me, housewives, doctors, lawyers, college students, gardeners, you name it. Got him to come into his lab, paired them up with other people, and they were tasked with memorizing pairs of random words. So I would say calendar, and Mike, you were supposed to say table, or I would say zebra, and you were supposed to say computer. And then he would separate the couple and put one person in one booth, another person in another booth. They could not see each other, but they had audio feed. And then I was supposed to cue you and say zebra, and you were supposed to say computer. And every time you got a question wrong, I was supposed to send you a little shock. And there was a switchboard that went from like 9 volts, which is, we've all looked at 9-volt battery. It's uncomfortable, but it's not fatal. All the way up in increasing increments to 450 volts, which of course is a fatal dose of electricity. Unbeknownst to the actual person being studied, the guy giving wrong answers in the other booth didn't exist. There were pre-formatted sounds of complaint and pain coming back, like, oh, ow, that really hurt. You gotta quit shocking me with these, gradiently increasing voltages because I had a heart attack last year and you're gonna kill me if you keep this up. And, you went from to screaming to pleas and cries like that. And it made a huge percentage of the study participants very uncomfortable, and they would turn to the conductor of the experiment, the guy in the white lab coat who was a doctor. He had Dr. So-and-so on his lab coat, and the person would say, hey, I can't keep shocking my buddy in that other room over a wrong answer on a memory quiz. Like, I'm not comfortable going on. And the guy was tasked, the lab doctor was tasked with saying just 3 or 4 simple words back: you must continue. Right. And the question Stanley Milgram sought to answer is, what percentage of Americans would nuke their neighbor to death over a wrong answer on a memory quiz just because a guy in a white lab coat with the word doctor in front of his name said he had to do it? And when he ran this study by his colleagues, they laughed at him. They said the only people who are going to continue up to the point of causing a fatality in that other room are the people who are sadists and psychopaths, 2% of the population. And when he actually did the study, 2/3 of Americans were willing to continue throwing the switch, despite being very uncomfortable and knowing it was immoral, just because a guy in a white lab coat said they had to do it. Every single person in the world needs to study that study, in my humble opinion. We are hardwired to follow authority, and sometimes that's a good thing, like in the Cro-Magnon years. But right now, especially if your authority isn't doing right by you, it is a very bad thing, and it can be a fatal thing.
Well, what's so shocking about that experiment, and you just gave the best description that I've ever heard of that experiment, by the way, is that we are walking around surrounded by people who are potential mass murderers as long as someone in a position of authority tells them to do so. Literally, 2 out of every 3 people walking around in the grocery store would murder you if told to do so under the right context.
That's right.
And so when you think about, well, now they're saying in Michigan, put masks on 2-year-olds. 2 to 4-year-old infants have to be masked. Who's going to go along with that? Well, hey, 2/3 of America would even murder those babies if they were told to by authority, frankly. So putting a mask on would probably have even higher compliance. I mean, this is crazy, and part of what I try to do is break the belief in false authority. Those authorities often are not qualified, and they make a mockery of science.